What's happening, everybody? Ice Rice here. Just started doing a little research on a couple of the UFCs that are coming up, and just wanted to toss the thoughts out there and predictions. So tomorrow, or actually, I guess it's today because it's past 12 o'clock now. November 18th, we have UFC Fight Night Sydney, Australia. Mauricio Verdum versus Marcin Tibura. And it's pretty much, Marcin Tibura is no joke, his last fight was against Andrei Arlovski, and Andrei Arlovski was on a 0-5 losing streak. Literally lost 5 in a row, and he used to be the UFC champion of the world. So, not much to talk about there, but he is actually on a 3-fight win streak in the UFC, which is impressive no matter what weight class you're in. Record of 16-2, and it's heavyweight, so usually if they punch you, it's lights out regardless. So you got to have a good chin for it. Fabricio Verdum used to be the heavyweight champion of the world. He lost to Stipe Miocic in Brazil. Stipe went down there and whooped his ass. Let's see. In his last 10 fights, he's 8-2, and he's actually a late replacement for Mark Hunt that was supposed to fight, because Mark Hunt's from Australia, and I guess he couldn't get cleared for his physicals and stuff like that. So they tossed Fabricio Verdum in there. His last win was over Walt Harris. It was like 4 weeks ago. It was in 67 seconds, I believe it was a guillotine. And Walt Harris had no business being in the octagon with Fabricio Verdum. He's a little bit older, but he was still a world champion. He's still one of the best Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioners in the game. So 67 seconds is impressive, but at the same time, that guy shouldn't have been there in the first place. Our co-main event is Bec Rawlings and Jessica Rose Clark. Both, it's 125 pounds. It's the new division for the women. What is it? They're both from Australia, so it's head-to-head for country pride. Bec Rawlings is 7-6, 2-2 in her last 4 fights, and she's finally fighting at her natural weight class. She was cutting a lot of weight to get to 115, and she missed weight a couple times. So it was hard on her. It's finally good to see her. She was I was watching the weigh-ins before this, and she actually looked happy. She looked pleasant. She looked fit. She didn't look nostalgic and beaten down because she hadn't eaten or drank anything in forever. She's mainly a striker, but also has kicks and pretty good wrestling, so we'll have to see what happens there. Jessica Rose Clark is 7-4, and she actually came in overweight for this fight by, I think it was 5 pounds. They give you 2 hours to lose the weight, no matter how many pounds you're over, but I don't know if she did it or not. This is actually her first fight in the UFC, so that's never a good look. First fight in the UFC, and you already come in overweight. But I know she was a late replacement, so I don't know if maybe there was like an agreement for a catch weight or something like that. So I guess we'll see how that works out. But the next fight, what is it, in the middleweight welterweight? It's Tim Means versus Bilal Muhammad. Tim Means was fighting at 155. He's finally come back up to 170, which is where he should be. He looks good. He's lanky. He's a tall fighter for 170, and obviously very tall for 155. But he looked slow and drained. So it was good to see him come back up to 170. Let's see, he's 27-8 overall, and he's 7-2-1 in the UFC in his last 10 fights. He's an amazing striker. The guy's just completely nasty. Like I said, he's super lanky, and he's a killer. regardless if he's outside, inside. It really doesn't matter. It's kind of weird to watch him like do, I guess, like different techniques with such like lanky, crazy, like crazy long arms. You would expect him to look like a T-Rex the way that he kind of throws like a little jab up there. But Bilal Muhammad, he trains with Tyrone Woodley, so he has to have good wrestling and good striking. He's 12-2, and when he came into the UFC, he was actually 12-0. He's 3-2 in his last 5 fights in the UFC, so his 2 losses have only come in the UFC, which that's not too bad. And let's see. After that, we got in 185 Elias Theodore and Daniel Kelly. Daniel Kelly is an Australian. I think he's one of the oldest people besides Mark Hunt in the UFC. He's 40 years old, but he comes with a ton of wrestling credentials. He has okay stand-up, but he's very like awkward. Like you wouldn't picture this guy and be like, oh, he's a UFC fighter. You see him and you're expecting him to be selling books at like a, I don't know, a mall or something. But Elias Theodore, or Theodoro, however you say his last name, he's an amazing striker, great wrestler. He came into the UFC with an unblemished record. He's lost twice in the UFC now. In the last 7 fights, he's 5-2. Daniel Kelly was 6-2 in his last 8. And what is it? Elias is actually he's a beast, man. The guy has cardio for days, never stops, and he actually has like some real down home, actual good striking. So. Fabricio Verdum versus Marcin Tibura. I'm going to go with Verdum on that. I think he just has all the experience. Beck Rawlings versus Jessica Rose Clark. I'm going to go with Beck Rawlings just because I don't even know who Jessica Rose Clark is. She came in overweight, and even if she does win, I think they should hold that against her because she came in as a late replacement, and if you can't make the weight, then don't take the fight. That's how I look at it, especially if you're brand new to the company. Like that doesn't even make sense. It's like walking into a brand new job high, getting hit by USADA for drugs. Tim Means versus Bilal Muhammad. I'm going to go with Tim Means. Bilal's he's good and he will be good, but I think Tim Means he's got a little roll going here. I think he's going to do well. Elias Theodore versus Daniel Kelly. I think Elias is a cocky piece of shit, to be completely honest. He has a man bun, and he looks like a jackass. But, I can't take away from his skills. He is, very skillful. He's a great striker, great wrestler, tons of cardio, good guy. But I want to watch the 40-year-old just whoop his ass. I want to watch Daniel Kelly, the Australian, just go in there and take over like he did when he fought Rashad Evans. The next fight card is UFC Fight Night China, November 25th, Bisping versus Kevin Gastelum. Bisping is doing a 3-week turnaround where he just lost his belt to GSP, and he's 31-8, 7-3 in his last 10 fights. Obviously, if you know anything about MMA, he's an amazing striker. He has cardio for days, and then, like I just said, he was the world champion up until a week and a half or 2 weeks ago. Kevin Gastelum, he I don't know if it's just his diet or whatnot, but he should be a 170 pounder. He's super small compared to these 185 guys. When he fought what the hell's his name, Chris Weidman, it was, even though he would connect with some good punches and you would hope that he would, he could knock him out with his power, he never came close to knocking him out, Chris Weidman out, and Chris Weidman just smothered him. He was just bullying him, throwing him all around the place like he wanted to. But Kevin Gastelum is 14-3. He has great knockout power. The dude's got hands for days. An amazing wrestler, and like I said, he's really small for the division, though, especially against Bisping. Bisping's, he knows his range. He's kind of an animal. But Kevin Gastelum is 6-3-1 in his last 10 fights. And the rest of the card on UFC China is just shit. It's no-name Asian fighters that they pulled together, I guess, at the last minute almost looks like. Never heard of any of these people. And the next one is UFC 218, Detroit, Michigan, Holloway versus Aldo 2. Frankie Edgar fell out of this fight against Holloway due to injury, and Aldo took his place. I guess I can kind of see why they did it, but it doesn't really make too much sense because Holloway beat the shit out of Aldo. It was a good fight for a little bit, but he ended up beating him in I believe it was the 4th round, TKO, knocked the dude out. So but at the end of the day, Aldo, the longest reigning featherweight champion in the UFC, and then the WEC before that, he beat Mike Brown, and Mike Brown beat Uriah Faber. Uriah Faber went on to fight Aldo several times, and then his one of his good friends, Renan Barao. But champ is 8-2. The only 2 fighters he's ever lost to in the UFC is Max Holloway and the good old Conor McGregor. He both TKOs. One was in the first round in 13 seconds against McGregor, and Holloway did it in the 4th round. But you can't really take anything away from the guy. He's a beast. Like I said, longest reigning featherweight champ ever for under the Zuffa Industries, and I guess I can see why he got the fight, but at the same time, Holloway just beat him, so it kind of pisses me off. I would have rather seen someone else in there, like Cub Swanson or someone like that, who has been working his way up and deserves it. But Holloway, he's 18-3. His last loss, because he's on an 11-fight win streak, his last loss came to actually Conor McGregor as well, and that was by split decision. He hung in there with, the hype that is McGregor. Even though McGregor wasn't at his his highest potential at the moment yet, but he was still. Everybody knew who Conor McGregor was. But super well-rounded fighter. The guy's got hands for days. He's got cardio. He's a beast. He believes in himself. He's Hawaiian, so he comes in with that Samoan swagger, that attitude that, I already got this, so just get out of my way and I'll take care of the rest type deal. And he's young, man. I think Aldo's like 34 or something like that. Max Holloway's 25 years old. He's already a UFC champion. 11-fight win streak, hasn't lost in a couple of years. It's crazy to watch, these young fighters come up and just be, amazing. And then the co-main event, striker versus striker, big, huge heavyweight guys. 2 of the biggest names in the UFC at the moment, Alistair "The Reem" Overeem against Francis Ngannou. Alistair Overeem is 43-15, 7-3 in his last 10 fights in the UFC, and one of the best strikers in the UFC ever. He's a K1 kickboxing champion, and he was also a Strikeforce champion, it was either Strikeforce or Pride champion, if I'm not mistaken. He's huge. The guy has to cut weight to make the 265-pound limit for heavyweights. He actually fought for the belt against Stipe and almost beat Stipe in the opening round. He clipped him with a punch and then tried choking him out. But eventually, a couple seconds later, actually, Stipe got up and bounced his head off the floor, the mat. But he looked pretty good there, and then he knocked out Junior Dos Santos, and I think that was his last fight. But Francis Ngannou, man, they've really been taking their time with this guy, which is good. He's 5-0 in the UFC. He's 10-1 overall in his pro career. He's a knockout artist. He knocks everybody out. Anybody that gets in his way, he just knocks him out. So Alistair Overeem, 37 years old, Francis Ngannou, 31, and they're both huge people. I think there's probably going to be close to like 600 pounds in the ring of two dudes. It's going to be crazy. But I have fight of the night written all over that, or at least a highlight reel knockout from one of them. After that, we have Henry Cejudo versus Sergio Pettis. They just did the UFC Ultimate Fighter Tough Show. I think it was not the one that was videotaping now, but the one before that, I believe. And, they have some bad blood. They had to deal with each other in Las Vegas and coaching against each other. So there's a little bit of heat there, rivalry. Henry Cejudo is 11-2. He came into the UFC unblemished. His record in the last 7 fights is 5-2. So he's lost 2. One was to Joseph Benavidez, and one was to Demetrius Johnson, who's the champ and hasn't lost in years. He's a gold Olympic medalist for wrestling, and 30 years old, 5'4". Tried writing down little facts about him so I didn't have to blabber about each one of them. Sergio Pettis, 5'6", so he's 2 inches taller. 16-2. They both have 2 losses. He's 6 years younger than Henry. And, literally on his profile it just said, well-rounded fighter, also Anthony Pettis' brother, which doesn't really help him lately because Anthony Pettis looks like crap. He's been getting beat up pretty bad lately. But he is a striker, and in the last 9 fights, he's 7-2. He is good, and I really hope that he gets out of his brother's shadow and starts to whoop some ass. Unfortunately, I don't think it's going to come against Henry Cejudo. If Henry Cejudo gets back to how he was looking when he got the fight against Demetrius Johnson for the belt, I think Henry Cejudo takes it and, does a pretty good job against Sergio Pettis. Alistair Overeem, versus Francis Ngannou. Overeem, he's an amazing striker, like I said, but he's fought over 60 fights. You have a guy that's fought 11, and he's 6 years younger than you, and he's a knockout artist. Overeem has been caught with his chin up, and I think that's going to be exactly how it ends as well. I think Francis Ngannou is going to knock him out probably first round, or no, I'm going to say first round TKO or knockout. Holloway versus Aldo. I think Holloway goes out there and he just spanks Aldo because he's been in the ring with him now. He beat him in the 4th round last time, and I think he's just too young. He's too fast. He's too powerful. He's too well-rounded, and his cardio is sick. So I think he walks in there and just steamrolls Aldo and hopefully gets him out in the first round so we don't have to watch Aldo fight anymore because all he does is bounce around and throw kicks, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Let's see. The next fight's Eddie Alvarez versus Justin Gaethje. Eddie Alvarez is, he came off the loss to Conor McGregor, and then he went on to fight Dustin Poirier, where he was getting the crap beat out of him, threw some illegal knees, so then they toss it into a no contest, which, to be completely honest, Poirier should have gotten the win for that because he was whooping up on him before it. But, I'm not a judge. So, Eddie Alvarez, 33 years old, 5'9", 28 wins, 5 losses. He has great boxing and great wrestling. He's the former champ of the lightweight division. He's super scrappy. But he's 3-2-1 in his last, 6 fights. We'll see if he can get back to his old ways. Justin Gaethje, 18-0. He's a 29-year-old kid, 5'11", amazing knockout power. He's a great striker. Whether it's elbows, knees, kicks, whatever he has to throw, the guy can throw it, and he throws it accurately. Great wrestling, whether it's defending the takedown or getting the takedown. He's a former champion of the World Series of Fighting, I believe it was. where obviously being 18-0, he was undefeated the whole time. This is going to be good. The last fight that Justin Gaethje had was against Michael Johnson, and that was a lot of fun to watch. It was back and forth the whole time, but in the end, Justin came through and whooped ass at the end. We have the little ladies, Tisha Torres versus Michelle Karate Hottie Watterson. Tisha Torres is 28. She's 9-1 in the UFC, or no, she's 9-1 overall and 5-1 in the UFC, and the only loss that she has is to Rose, the brand new champion of the division. So Thug Rose, shout out to Thug Rose. She looked really good against the ex-champ now, and it's going to be fun to watch. I don't really know what's going to happen there. Obviously, with 6 wins in a row, they got to give the champ a run back, or at least a hurry up fight, so then she can get back into title contention. But I think they should definitely give her a chance to fight for the belt against Rose again. Michelle Watterson, she's 31 years old. She's 14-5 in her pro MMA career. She's 5'3", and she's 2-1 in the UFC. Her loss is also to Rose, not Mutas, or however you said her name. Thug Rose is what I just call her. Pat Barry's wife. And, both these girls have both lost to the champ, so that's not a bad thing or something to be upset about. But in the end, I think that's gonna be one of those fun fights, because Tisha Torres she's a little beast. I think they call her like the little tornado or something like that. And then Karate Hottie, Michelle Watterson. I don't think that really takes much imagination to come up with why they call her Karate Hottie. But it's going to be a fun fight to watch. And then there's Charles Oliveira versus Paul Felder. Both of them had fought at 155 for a little while. And I think it was a lot of weight for both of them to cut. And now they're both at 170, where they're doing very well. I didn't really get much information on Charles Oliveira, but Paul Felder, he's trained with Jackson Winklejohn out in New Mexico, and good buddies with Donald Cerrone. So he's a barn burner. He loves to throw punches, and he's a beast. He's 4-3. I forget what his record is in the UFC, but he's a guy to be watching right now. It's definitely worth just checking out that fight at least. Felice Herrig versus Courtney Casey. Let me just say that I am excited to see Felice Herrig back in the UFC. She was out for a little bit. I don't know if it was due to injury or she just wasn't getting the fight tossed her way or what was going on, but she's 13-6 overall in her in her pro career, and she's 4-1 in the UFC. And I think the only fight that she lost to was Paige Van Zant, who's with the Uriah Faber's camp. What the hell do they call themselves? Team Alpha Male. So, she's a well-rounded, great fighter. But Felice Herrig, Jesus. She's just like the epitome of like sexy and at the same time like classy. Like, she dresses nice, and then at the same time like she like flirts with the camera, and every time she gets on the screen, and it's just funny to watch. But she's, like I said, 13-6 overall, 4-1 in the UFC. She's 33 years old. She's 5'4", an amazing cardio, and she's super well rounded. The only fight that she lost was, I believe it was against the Paige Van Zant fight. But other than that, she's a beast, man. She always handles it. Let's see, Courtney Casey. She's 30 years old, so 3 years younger than Felice. She's 7-4 overall, and she's 3-3 as of late in the UFC. She's well rounded, and she's actually a pretty good striker. I don't know exactly who she's been fighting, but being 3-3, whether it's split decision or a knockout or TKO or you're getting submitted or whatnot. But you're 50% in the UFC, which you're in the UFC, which is a good thing, but you're at 50%, so that's not too great. If I have to make my picks on these, I'm going to go Felice Herrig, Paul Felder, Michelle Watterson, and Justin Gaethje. And I believe that's it. Yeah, that is all for me. I'm always down for other ideas. Still looking for a co-host. It's easier when you get back and forth banter with people. It makes the show a lot better, a lot more pleasurable. And I don't sit here and pretty much talk to myself. So if you're interested, hit me up. If you have any questions, comments, or you think I should talk about something or bring something up on the podcast, let me know. Ice Rice, hit me up next time, and I'll probably see you later this week. Thanks, guys.